welcome to Voice in the Alexander Technique. I'm Allison Taylor, and today we're going to be exploring gravity and what it is like to be a human person standing on the ground. So this sequence is based on a course that was developed by David Gorman called Standing on Top of the World. So I'm going to take you through my interpretation of this work today as a way to explore the different ways that we perceive ourselves in relationship to the ground and the different ways that we perceive the effort required to stand at ease, with freedom. So think of some different situations where you find yourself on your feet. Maybe you are standing in line at the grocery store, and often we are kind of sinking into one hip or checking the time, waiting at the bus stop. So there's maybe that kind of waiting stance. And maybe you have some discomfort in those times where your attention is kind of on the waiting as opposed to the times where you're inspired. Maybe you're playing frisbee, or you're just taking in a stream, or being in a meadow where your attention is out and up and in the world. And your system, your body will coordinate and follow suit. So if my intention is down and on my watch and waiting and I'm frustrated, maybe it makes sense that I'll have some back pain or some shoulder pain because there's this downward pull as my attention is in and down. Whereas when I'm up and alert and engaged in my surroundings, my attention isn't on my body or on aches and pains. My whole self is engaged in the activity that I'm taking part in because I'm enjoying myself. So keep these in mind as we're moving through the next little sequence. So I first just want you to bring some attention to your feet. Notice where you are more over your feet. Are you more over your heels? Is more pressure on your front of your foot, the sides of your foot? So just bring some attention to how you are in contact with the ground right now. Is there more contact on your heels, the sides of your feet, the toes, the insides of the feet? Just check it out. And now consider gravity. What direction is gravity? What's the force of gravity? If you could point with your finger to signal the direction of that force of gravity, where would you point? Right, most of us would rely on our knowledge of gravity being a downward force that's keeping us on the planet. So it's a downward force to gravity. So I just want you to orient yourself to that downward force for a moment and really turn up the volume on that force. So you're not here with me to ask you what you're experiencing, so I'm going to hypothesize or imagine that you might be feeling heaviness. You may be feeling the shoulders getting heavy coming forward. Perhaps you're feeling a heaviness or even a compression in the lower back. Maybe more pressure into your feet. Many of us look down right away. So maybe as we continue to turn up the volume on that downward force of gravity, see what happens in you in response to that intention, in response to that perception of the downward force of gravity. And now keep that going and lift your arm out to the side. We're looking at activation of muscles here, forces of effort. So where do you feel an activation of muscles to keep your arm here out to the side? Again, you're not right here with me to respond, so I'm imagining you might be feeling some activation, you might call that tension, but some activation of muscles here on the top of the shoulder, the top of the arm, with that downward force of gravity. How is that interacting with your arm out in space here? What muscles are active to support this arm being far away from your torso, being far away from your center? Maybe you're starting to feel it in the upper arm now, maybe even a burning sensation. So now that you're more aware of the activation of muscular effort to support your arm here within this downward gravitational force, you can consciously turn off that activation and drop the arm into that force of gravity, and most likely it will fall down to the side. So now take a little walk around and just come back to yourself. Come out of that downward gravity. So that's one perception. It's an example of how we're told a fact, we're told an idea, we have this belief about gravity, we assimilate that belief, and our whole system, the body, the way we think, the way we experience that idea, immediately translates into a coordination, a particular coordination. In this case, again, I'm imagining for you, maybe it was a sort of downward or a heaviness and quite a lot of effort to move within that downward force. So here you are now. We're going to do a 180. We're going to flip our perception. I'd like for you to make two little legs. So here's you, two little legs. And with your other hand, you're going to be the earth. So now imagine, here you are floating out in space, and here's the earth floating up, and you're drawn to the earth with the same force that the earth is drawn to you. This may not be entirely scientifically accurate, and for the purposes of this experiment, we're working within this idea that we're being drawn to the earth as the earth is being drawn to you, and eventually you meet. There's a meeting point. Just as the earth, as you're coming down to meet the ground or the earth is coming up underneath you to meet you. So the meeting point you've made with your fingers and your palm of your hand, it's that same meeting point of your feet with the ground, with the whole planet coming up underneath your feet. So just as the ground meets you, you are meeting the ground. And see what it's like to turn up the volume on that sense of the ground coming up underneath you to support you. And accepting that support up through the ankles, up through the knees, we can let go now into that upward support. So letting go of any extraneous holding or muscular effort of standing, letting go into that upward support up through the ankles, knees, up through the hips, the pelvis, letting go through each vertebra of the spine, letting go through the head spine joint and beyond. We become a channel for this upward support. One image I like to use is champagne bubbles fizzing up through you. So here you have the ground coming up underneath you to support you. And then do that same movement of bringing your arm out to the side. Still allowing that upward support to come up underneath you. What is it like to support your arm out away from your torso here within that upward orientation? What are the differences here in this upward orientation compared to the downward orientation? So again, you're not here to get your direct feedback, but I'd love to hear it. I'm imagining that you might feel an ease in a different way. Perhaps you're feeling the effort evenly distributed throughout the whole of you to support your arm here. As you keep letting go into that upward support, let go into that upward orientation. Some people have even felt like, oh my goodness, my arm could just continue to float right up there. And letting go of the effort of holding the arm there to allow it to come back to your side. Maybe you notice that it moves differently than when you were in downward gravity support. So now, we've just had, possibly, 2 different experiences with the same body parts, right? You didn't get a new arm, you didn't lose 20 pounds in your arm. It's the same arm, the same muscular suit, but our experience of that part can be vastly different, depending on how we orient ourselves in relationship to the planet. So I encourage you to experiment with this. Don't take my word for it. And see what it's like to do other activities in these 2 very different orientations. If you go with the gravity orientation, what is it like to walk from there? And then stop, let that go. Renew your earth coming up underneath you as you meet the earth. Letting go into that upward support as you walk with that orientation. Is there any difference? So again, don't take my word for it. Have a play in this sandbox of orientation to the ground, orientation to the planet, and let me know in the comments below what it's like for you to breathe in these 2 different orientations. What is it like for you to sing from these 2 different places? What's it like for you to order your Starbucks from this different way of being on top of the earth? So let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, have a great day.